We are on. It's good morning. We have fog here. It's looks like winter, and we are enjoying the season.
It is winter.
So today we start with Genesis 19. Well, I don't think I read that. Maybe I did.
Genesis what?
Genesis
Oh
1:19.
yeah.
And there was evening and there was morning, a fourth day. That's one that doesn't mention whether it's good or bad. Maybe it's because it was included with the light,
Oh
producing
yeah.
light.
That's interesting. Wow.
And then verse 20 says, God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures and birds that fly above the earth and across the expanse of the sky. And so we see there, it's waters that they're coming out of.
Hmm.
Do you know what this matches?
So,
It matches the progression that the um, Darwin plan of evolution, that the waters brought forth these lizards
oh.
and stuff. Now, just keep in mind, it's one thing to say evolution did it, or whether God did it. It doesn't. Time isn't of essence. It's who did it. Verse 21 says, God created the great sea monsters and all the living creatures of every kind that creep, which the waters brought forth in swarms, and all the winged birds of every kind. Um, the Hebrew word here for great sea monsters is called tanim. And what Prager wants to point out, and that's his translation I'm using,
Mm-hmm.
is that sea creatures were worshipped by other nations in biblical times.
Okay.
And the Torah singles out this creature to emphasize that these animals, which were worshipped as God, are not gods, but were created by the one true God. So that's another way of saying what I said, that as long as we understand not how these things were made, but who made them,
Mm-hmm.
that's the important thing we have to focus on.
That's right.
Now, I would like to say that these creatures were made. No, they were just brought forth. It doesn't say how they were made.
That's right.
It doesn't say they were made or they were created. It says in the second verse, and all winged.
Second verse.
Well, in verse 21, it says, this verse contains the second use of the word created. It is not in the English. We have a problem. Oh, yes, it is. It says God created.
Mm-hmm.
Bara. Something new was created. The animals. See, up to this time, you just have grass and foliage, okay? He grew foliage, and then he created these animals or creatures.
That's the fowl?
The fowl and the monsters in the sea and the swarms and creeping things. There's three things created in this chapter: the world, the animals, and the human being. Everything else is made. And to make something is you take physical matter and form it into something different than what it is. When you create something, it comes directly, I say it comes directly from God Himself in the form of an energy that makes, like the beginning, it comes first, it becomes a light, then the light waves slow down and become matter. That's the creation from the nothing. So when He creates a creature, He's taking something from himself. Maybe it's his imagination. And he calls forth from the waters. So some kind of energy went into the waters to bring forth these different kinds of things. Now, one of the things that came forth were these huge lizard-like animals that we call dinosaurs. And there were dinosaur birds as well as the dinosaur lizards. And he says to these things, he says, this is good in verse 21. And God saw that this was good. Well, we think of these huge creatures as being rather horrible.
Yeah.
They devoured all the
Monsters, yeah.
foliage that they could get up. Some of
Why
them
do
devoured
you-
foliage.
Why do you need something that big running around?
Okay,
scaring
I'm
everything?
going to give my theory on that because I can't find anybody else that says it.
Oh dear. This is a
And,
Adina original.
Then there's these huge dinosaurs that eat flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's my friend Nathan Aviezer in Barkan University says that Bar-Ilan. He says that no mammal or only small tiny mammals that could scurry into corners and not be caught by these creatures survived. He says no mammal was created at this point because they wouldn't have survived. These huge dinosaurs would have eaten them.
You wonder why Hashem wanted to do this.
I want to talk to that, but let's find out first. They said that, well, let's see, verse 22, God blessed them and saying, be fertile, I'm reading from my iPad, and increase, fill the waters in the sea and let the birds increase on the earth.
Oh,
So-
by the way, do you know what that reminds me of?
What does it
I didn't
remind?
notice it before. It's almost the same command he gave to man, be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah, he does that because he wanted a lot of these things. He had a reason. So there was evening and morning of the fifth day. Now, in order for the sixth day to take place and bring forth mammals and creeping things on the earth, these lizards came onto the earth, but they like to be in the water. So those was basically the water bringing forth all that stuff. Yeah. And these monstrous lizards that we call dinosaurs, I think their purpose, I can't find anybody that says this, but they were devouring a lot of plant life. So the plant life must have been doing great. Yeah. There must not have been a tilt of the planet yet, so that the whole earth was one greenhouse of plant life, and they were devouring the plants, and they were devouring any other things like living things, fish, birds, whatever they could chaw on. That went through their system. That came out of their system, and whatever they trampled became a layer of stuff for oil and coal. That's my take on it.
Wow, interesting.
Because there was swampland. All of this, you get coal out of swampland. That's where the peat bogs are in Scotland. So all of this is in preparation for mammal life and humans, because God knew what our needs would be.
Which shows, again, this is a period of time, not just a day.
And also the chemical,
right?
Yes. Yes, a period of time, because it took a long time for all this to go on. So a chemical process goes on when we digest stuff. And so these animals were digesting. Chemical processes would have been going on, which would create more chemistry that humans need to rely on to make them.
Wow.
So now, how was it? They see in the fossil record that all of a sudden these things died.
Yeah.
They were just wiped out. Well, that's in preparation for the next day. So, but I want to read here what Eliezer, out of Fossils and Faith, Understanding Torah and Science by Nathan Aviezer. Okay, this is the book. You can see it. There's a lot of scientists that don't go along with the Darwin theory anymore because it can't be proved. So they're trying to figure out some of these things a different way, even though there's a bit of what we call evolution, species dying, species being changed through, let's see, what do they call it? Diversion, diverse things that happen to them. So the great creatures, how did they, the Darwin evolution don't have a reason or how it happened. So this Kimura, he abandoned his research on the non-Darwin evolution, but along comes this these scientists, and they come up with this thing called the impact theory.
Impact theory.
One of the long-standing puzzles of evolutionary biology is the sudden demise of all world dinosaurs and all other dinosaur-like species. The gigantic reptiles were among the most successful animals that ever lived, inhabiting every continent. The air-flying dinosaurs, and he gives a name of them, and the sea and ocean marine dinosaurs, and he gives a name for them. And then after terrorizing all other forms of animal life for well over 100 million years, their name means terrible lizard. The dinosaurs abruptly disappeared from the fossil record, and together with them about 70% of all the other animal species. What catastrophe struck down all these enormous creatures that for so long had been so fit in the Darwin sense? Darwin says the fittest survive.
Right. Oh yeah. That's
So
right.
here's the fittest animals ever,
The dinosaur
and
was the fittest,
they're
yeah.
gone just like that. This question is not new. For many decades, biologists have struggled with this conundrum, and the array of proposed explanation is truly staggering. No ideas seem too far-fetched to prevent some biologists from championing it. So they had all kinds of bizarre hypotheses. The puzzle was finally solved in 1980 when professors Luis and Walter Alvarez of the University of California showed that this mass extinction was caused by the impact of a meteor falling with tremendous speed from outer space and colliding with our planet, with devastating results. The meteoric impact occurred in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The overwhelming scientific evidence that now supports this explanation, known as the impact theory, was the subject of a detailed article in Physics Today. Okay, that's all I'll read of that.
So
if you want to know a lot
it
about...
was in Utah, in Mexico.
Right.
But did that affect the whole Earth then?
Yeah. Well, there's something that went on besides that. And he didn't say it in there, but I'm saying it because I think that's what happened.
Okay.
When this thing is hit, it was so big and it made such an impact that it knocked the Earth off of the axis that it was on.
Oh my goodness.
So the axis would have changed, which would have changed the weather patterns. And in some places, everything dried up. These dinosaurs didn't have a thing to eat because of the heat that they weren't used to. And then the snow fell in the north and the south.
Is that when the Ice Age came in?
It might have been the beginning of an ice age. There's lots of ice ages, so it could have been. But it's definitely God doing something to break a cycle that had been going on. In other words, from his perspective, I got what I wanted out of this model. Now it's ready for something new.
This is all before man.
It's all before man. So let's see here. God
Verse 24.
24. No, it's verse, we were on 22, I think. God, he had all that stuff increasing. And then on verse 23, that's the end of the fifth day. There was
Right.
evening and there was morning the fifth day. Doesn't say it was good
No, that's interesting.
because it's connected to the rest of the stuff he's
I
making.
never noticed that before. Wow.
God said, let the earth bring forth every kind of living creature. Now, where is this stuff going to come from now?
This is verse 24, right?
Yeah, it's not coming from the sea.
Mm,
It's coming from the earth.
that's right. What the contrast?
So if I'm right about he needed new chemicals in the earth to do the next part of creation,
Wow.
then that's the reason why it's coming from the earth.
Wow.
So let the earth bring forth every kind of living creature, cattle, creeping things, wild beasts of every kind. And it was so. So God made these creatures first. They're still doing something in preparation before the man is made.
Yeah.
God made wild beasts of every kind and cattle of every kind, all kinds of creeping things on the earth, and God saw that this was good.
Yeah. But there it is.
In other words, I'm approaching some pinnacle, and I really like what's going on. So then in verse 26, God says, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. So at the top of all of this creating, or bringing forth, is what it says, bringing forth. Doesn't say he created the wild beasts. He says he brought them forth. So the earth had the pattern in it, and God apparently just spoke and said, come forth. But he said about man, let's make man in our image. Now it says make, that is not create.
Yeah.
But man gets made and created. No other beast was said about it like that. There's a lot, we have to see the differences between man and beast, which is very important. In Genesis 1, describes the human being Adam in two ways. First, it says man, a man. It doesn't say the man. The second time man is mentioned, it's the man. And Prager is saying, man may be understood to denote man-like creatures that lacked a human soul. This man is physiologically both animal-like and man-like, but it is not necessarily the man, Adam. The man, the human being with a soul, which is different, a different creation, as we shall see in the next verse. Now, he deals with in our image. A lot of people struggle with this verse, both Jew and Christian. And this is what he says. To whom is the verse referring when it says, let us in our image? There are Jewish and Christian faith answers, but there is no definitive one. It may be the royal we, that is used historically by kings in referring to themselves, and by popes to this day. Indeed, one doesn't have to be royalty. I've used this term for decades on my radio show. We'll be right back after this break.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It may connote celestial bodies such as angels, which I said were created before the worlds were created. And it may refer to the animals, an explanation that comports with the creature man, referred to here as opposed to the man referred to in the next verse. Some medieval commentators, writes Orthodox Jewish writer Scott A. Shea, man is both a creature descended from animals and different from them. And Rambam and Abarbanel explain that man originally resembled an animal and was created along with the rest of creation before the sixth day. Whether or not one accepts this last explanation, which I first heard from an Orthodox rabbi, The human being could be indeed regarded as part animal, part divine, because human life is a constant battle between the animal and the divine. Uh, the fossil record shows man, some say 200,000 years on the earth. Some give it less than that. But it's been many thousands of years. So how do I reconcile that with Genesis? I'm not sure. I've read a really good one from the scientists. All they know is that man appeared. And they know that it's the same as a man today because of the DNA and those ancient bones that they found in different layers. And they don't know why there's this cycle of this man. They have various theories about how he wandered over the earth, where he went on the earth. And some say, oh, he just came out of Africa. Others have them going into Europe and back again. There's all kinds of theories about the migration of man on the earth. I have an idea about it.
Oh, what's that?
Well, God says that he fashioned man from the earth. This sounds funny. We think I originally thought this too. Oh, he just took some clay that was over here in the Holy Land and fashioned this man. He was fashioning him out of all the elements of the earth by letting him wander all over the earth. Because do we realize that every time we eat something, whether it's animal or plant, we are gaining something from the earth. It goes into our system and we get, they say, eat your beets. Okay, why? Because we get iron from the beets. Well, eat this or that and you'll get this or that.
Carrots help the eye.
Yes, and so we have all these elements in the earth. Some parts of the earth produce more of an element than another part of the earth. Well, how do we maintain these things that are in man if we don't live in the part of the earth that has that part? We've become an economy creature. We get things from other people that are in that part of the earth. We ship things to those people in that part of the earth. But at the first, God has man wandering all over the earth collecting these parts that make him function better. He's still a creature, but he's collecting earth to make into the man, the ideal man that God has in mind. That's my take on it. You can think about it and come up with your own, okay? So, in verse, let's see, 26 continued. We didn't read 26. Oh, we did. Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Image denotes something physical. So the our, in my opinion, is something that has a physical element to it. When he says make it in our image, we're going to give it a physicality, and in our likeness he's going to be able to operate like I do, the non-physical. That's my take on that. Okay. Prager didn't say too much about that, except that a human being has a human soul, which is different from the rest of creation.
Right.
But I want to explain that more in second chapter when we get the second part about Adam.
Yeah.
And so he creates them, and he says they'll rule the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, the cattle of the whole earth, and all the creeping things that creep on the earth. Man is taken from all the earth, then, in my scenario, and he's given rule over everything. Yeah. Now, rule doesn't mean you bang things on the head and make them conform to your ideas. You shepherd. That's what the Jews say about this. I don't I didn't look up the word rule here. It might be row E, which means to shepherd. It was used for the word shepherd. That means you learn about these things and you learn the wisdom of how to take care of them, and you learn to utilize them for the purposes for which they were made. Are you looking at the Hebrew?
Yeah.
Because I don't have the Hebrew here in this translation.
Romesh.
No, that's the creeping things. They shall rule. The first part of the verse.
Lamina.
Okay, Lamina is to understand.
Be'et. Kol. Romesh. Adama.
That's the ground, the whole earth.
Lamina who?
Which I brought from that. There it is. Look over. Watch out for. That's the word that develops. Yeah, it develops into the idea of shepherding.
Okay. Yeah. That's.
So when he actually, this is. He hasn't made the man yet. He's just suggesting they're going to make the man.
Yeah.
And they shall rule. So this is the purpose. We're getting the purpose of man on the earth. He will shepherd this earth. He will take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
He will have the wisdom
It's beautiful. Yeah.
to know how and the use of each item that I put on the earth. So the fish have a purpose. The dogs have a purpose. All these things have a purpose in which to serve man, or to serve man in helping him look over the whole earth.
Yeah, it's like the dog being trained to help the blind or to rescue people.
Right. There's all kinds of gifts that dog, we've found out the dog has. He can find things because he smells better than a lot of animals. I mean, his nasal smell factor, the olfactory factor, is very good. So that verse 26 tells us the purpose of man on the earth.
Yeah.
And it's to have the whole earth coordinated and in peace. These animals are going to live in peace. And we find out that he created wild animals as well as domesticated animals. So there has to be someone who knows the purpose of each kind of animal so that they can live in harmony. And so then in verse 20 says, and God created the man in Hebrew.
Okay, now, yeah, in verse 26 it says, and you've talked about this, let's make man, not create. But now it says, so
he
God
created. So that means he's doing something in addition to what he's already made.
Really? Okay.
And can you read that first part?
It never did say that he made. It just says, let us make man. It doesn't say it was actually happened, but I guess we can assume it did.
Well, the image was made was said to be, it was going to be made.
Yeah, right.
But it says created man, the man. He says this verse seems to describe precisely what the previous verse described, the creation of man in God's image, but it does not. I don't know. There are 4 differences, each which is highly significant. Okay, he gives 4 differences about this verse over the previous verse, okay? 1, in the previous verse, God makes. In this verse, God creates. Implies something pre-existing creates, implies something new is made. In the previous verse, God makes man. In this verse, God creates the man. The English translation doesn't give it, he says. In the previous verse, man is made in our image. In this verse, the man is created only in God's image.
Okay.
In the previous verse, no mention is made of the creation of male and female. This verse says male and female, he created them.
Yeah.
And so that is a difference between that and the first. So in verse 27, male and female, he created them. The man is described as having been created as male and female. This is an example of the divine order in creation. The male-female distinction is part of God's order. So he's saying that in order to have order on the earth, he needs both a man and a female.
Well, even with the animals, when he said
Reproduce and
reproduce, it implies that there was both female and male.
Right. There's few one-cell animals that are amorphic. They reproduce themselves without male or female. But that's very few. So this is there are ancient and modern readers who believe this statement suggests the human Adam was created androgynous. That means both male and female. Such a reading cannot be reconciled with the plain text. If Adam were created as a male and female being, the last word in the verse would not be the plural, them. It would say he created them. It says he created them. It would read he created him,
Right.
or it.
Mm-hmm.
In English, that's what it would say. I'm not sure, because there are some rabbis that do believe this, that Adam was created both male and female, and then God separated them. And that this is something I'll have to look at when we get to chapter 2, about what he used to create. See, some people say, well, he just took this rib out of Adam and they made Eve from it. And there's a lot of rabbis that say, no, it says side. It doesn't say rib. It just says it took from his side. And so it was like she was created and attached to him like a Siamese twin or something. And he separated them. So I'll look at that a little more closely in the Hebrew when we get to that in chapter 2.
Okay.
But the first commandment these two are given is be fertile and increase and fill the earth and master it. So he's got it all there in one verse. You have to have the rulership over the earth, and you must increase. You must be fertile.
This is interesting. It says subdue it and rule over.
Oh, okay. This translation is blessed them and said to them, be fertile and increase, fill the earth and master it.
Yeah.
So it includes all of that.
Yeah.
So to have children is the first commandment in the Torah. And you have not fulfilled Torah unless you have children.
Why?
Because that's the first commandment.
Yeah.
And that's why the Jews are so set on people marrying and creating children. It's more important to them than anything than in most other cultures.
And we see lots of kids around here.
Oh, they just, boy, do we ever.
They're popping out every day.
But this is also why the rabbis must marry.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare to have a rabbi that isn't married. Very, very, very rare.
That says a lot.
That's the first order to becoming a rabbi, is to marry.
Wow.
And that's just the opposite of the Catholic priests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, isn't that something?
And they also have what they call monasteries, and they go into seclusion. They had that with the Essenes, they think, to a degree. But that was a sect of Judaism that did not do well as far as proliferating or having an effect on the mainstream Jews.
Right.
So it was important that they fulfill this Now, some say that the Essenes had children, at least a few, before they joined the group. And at that point, they no longer had children.
Wow.
So I don't know much about that. They don't really have enough writings, I don't think. They've got the rules of the order, but they don't have enough information to definitively say it's this way or that way. So today, young people in European countries and Japan are having so few children that the continued existence of some of those nations is at risk. So that's why it seems plausible that people migrate into those areas, because it's like a vacuum is created. Oh, we can do well there. And then the population changes from what it had been to something else. Now, either man will rule over nature, or nature will rule over man. In verse 28 continues, and rule the fish of the sea, and the birds of the sky, and all the living things that creep on the earth. God grants man dominion over the animal and all of nature. If we don't do it, it'll rule over us.
Right. Yeah.
And
I think there's scriptures that say that too. That the wild animal would be a problem if we don't.
Yeah. He says that does not mean humans have the right to abuse nature or to inflict unnecessary suffering on animals. But it does mean the world was created for human use. And I think once we see the difference between human as an animal with the divine in him, an animal that doesn't have this divine part.
Spark, yeah.
And they call it a spark. And it doesn't mean that the animal is less important to God. It just means that he has a different purpose. Then we'll begin to understand that to eat plant or to eat animal is not bad, which some people are saying that it's bad. I don't mind if people are vegetarians, if they choose that. But we shouldn't be living in a day when people are condemning what other people eat, and vice versa, because it's sort of divided between the animal eaters and the non-animal eaters. And both animal and plant have life from God.
It's like this one rancher here, not too far from us, said all of his cattle are vegetarians.
Yeah, so my meat is a vegetarian. It's true. The Jew is not allowed to eat animal that eats other things, other animals. But there's some wisdom in some of this stuff that we haven't threaded out yet as a world of people. And we do the best we can with what we have and what we know. And it's best to leave it that way until God shows us something different. And if God shows me that I should be a vegetarian, I'm going to be a vegetarian. Until then, I shouldn't be condemning people that eat meat. And I shouldn't condemn people that eat meat after I become a vegetarian. Because God has blessed everything, and there's a reason why he's told Noah, you can eat everything.
That's right. Yeah.
And he didn't even give him kosher rules. There might have been some implied in that a little bit, but we can deal with that later. Okay, so the biblical instruction to rule over nature has profoundly influenced those societies touched by the Bible. Among other things, it opened the way to finding cures for diseases. It is no coincidence that the Western world essentially developed modern medicine. In order to develop medicine, the first requirement is to understand human beings must learn how to conquer nature. conquer, not pray to natural forces like rain gods or try to propitiate them. And so he goes into the reasons why we are given rule over the earth and the progress it has made possible for humans to rule over nature and so forth. Next week we'll start with 129, where we talk about what God gives them to eat.
Well, you have touched on that already.
Yeah, I did. Well, yeah, okay, we'll just read that and then maybe next week we'll see where we go. God said, "See, I give you every seed-bearing plant that is upon the earth and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit. They shall be yours for food." God's original intention was for both human beings and, as the next verse makes clear too, animals to be vegetarian. The theme of universal vegetarianism is returned to again by the prophet Isaiah. The wolf and the lamb shall graze together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the serpent's food shall be earth. In all my sacred mount, nothing evil or vile shall be done, says the Lord. A reason explained in the commentary to Genesis 9:3, human beings were subsequently permitted to eat meat. So for further discussion of this subject, see the essay, Does the Torah Advocate Vegetarianism? And so that's where he leaves it. And we'll do with 30 and 31. And I think that's the end of the 6th day.
Yeah.
So we will finish with those two next week. Okay, have a good week and have a good time with your family and friends during the holiday season. Amen.